Real stories of werewolves, of Dogman from history, from your emails, illustrated and animated with the democratizing magic of machine learning AI. Welcome to Scary Stories.
This year during the holidays, I think those of us still alive and breathing have more to be thankful for than usual. So many more have left us in the past few years than is usual for the human race, to the point that even still being alive and kicking is a miracle to be certain. Our first reader on this channel, the first voice you heard here in 2016, was PQ River. In 2024, PQ told me that he found he was aging more quickly than he had expected. I can't get into that any further to respect his privacy. PQ got an offer from a fan of his radio show to come live with her in Europe, where she could care for him into his old age. And that's where he is now, with that woman who is now much more than his fan. He showed me a photo of her taking him to the cavern in Liverpool to see where the Beatles started out. And he looked happy. I hope he is. And I send him hope and best wishes for the season. In this episode today, we've got 2 stories read by PQ from back in the day, and I've created brand new animations to illustrate them. As you listen to these, I hope you remember to live every day as fully as you can, because you don't know how many more of them you have left. Happy holidays, everyone.
The Beautiful Dog Lady, as told to Peter Bernard, read by PQ River. I'm a forest ranger, so I can't reveal my identity because this story could get me fired. However, ironically, these are the actual details of why I became a forest ranger in the first place. This all happened 22 years ago, the summer that I turned 13 years old. Most years I went to summer camp, but that year my dad started a new job in upstate New York. Money was a bit tight for the first few months, so neither of my parents minded when I asked if I could stay home for the summer, explore the area, maybe make some new friends. We lived on the outskirts of Woodstock, which by the 90s, when this happened, had already become a somewhat exclusive artsy community. Even though it's kind of almost in the country, all the kids I met had rich parents and a more sophisticated vocabulary. After a week and a half, I had settled in with a group that liked all the same bands that I liked, only they used longer words to explain why. One day, the crazy one in the group, who I will call Animal because he reminded me of the drummer from the Muppets, started shouting, "Let's go to Overlook." Everyone said no, and I kept asking, "What's Overlook?" but nobody would answer. Later that day, Animal finally told me it was like a giant forest, completely wild. Figures that he wanted to go there. But we didn't go to Overlook. Not that day, not that week, and not that month. Animal kept suggesting it, though, and the idea started sounding more appealing to the group, until suddenly one day in the 2nd or 3rd week of August, there we were, hiking along the highway, heading toward the Overlook Mountain Wild Forest. None of our parents had any idea where we were, but I think mine were the only ones that might have cared. One of the other kids carried a cell phone, one of those early Nokia ones with the antenna that opened up with a keyboard in it, so if we got lost we could get rescued. By mid-1990s standard, I felt like I'd be pretty safe as long as I didn't stray too far from the group. Altogether, there were 6 of us, and although the others grew bored quickly on the walk there, I was happy just to be free and looking at the stuff one finds along the side of the highway. When we finally reached our destination, everyone perked up a bit and I got super excited. I remember running around with Animal, both of us so glad to finally be there, at the now legendary Overlook. We both took turns chasing each other like puppies or kittens, which is essentially what we were. After a while, I noticed we couldn't hear the other kids anymore. I told Animal we'd better go back and find them. I wanted to stay close to the kid with the cell phone, reasoning that without that device, if we got lost, we would just be lost. Animal said, "Fine, let's go back, but first I gotta pee," and he disappeared into the foliage. So there I was, 13 years old in the forest completely alone. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I wished I could be home with my mother very badly. You are not going to cry. You are not going to cry, I repeated to myself internally, over and over. I called out to Animal in a shaky voice. Then I cleared my throat and called for him in what I thought was a more confident-sounding way. He did not respond. I continued to remind myself not to cry. I heard bushes moving further up the path. Must be Animal. I felt a huge sense of relief knowing that at least I wasn't alone anymore. I was going to be nervous until I got back with the others, but this was a vast improvement in my situation. Except Animal didn't come out of the bushes. An animal came out, but not my crazy friend. An animal came out of the bushes that looked like a dog, a very, very large dog. Walking on all fours, it was still taller than I was at that age. I was frozen in fear. I saw something on TV once that said if a predatory animal comes upon you in the wild, don't run. I forgot what it said you should do, but I remember it said to not run, so I didn't. I just stood there looking at an impossibly large dog, or wolf. I guess it was more of a wolf than a dog. Its coat was a mix of grays and whites and silvers. It was really a beautiful creature, standing there, half in and half out of the bushes, staring at me as silently as I was staring at it. Then it took a couple or 3 casual steps out of the forest, and I could see by the teats on its underbelly that it was a female, and by the enlarged belly that she was very, very pregnant. That's when she stood up. I mean, she was already standing up, but now she stood up on her 2 hind legs. I remember the world started shaking violently for a while. Then I realized it was me that was shaking. I suddenly felt intensely cold. I don't think the temperature changed. I just think the blood drained from my body out of fear. The she-wolf stood on her hind legs, now so tall that I can't even hazard a guess as to her height. Then suddenly she walked over and began smelling me all over as I held as still as I could. I've seen video of bears walking on 2 legs, and they're a bit clumsy. I've seen gorillas and chimps do it, and they're a bit more graceful. This dog lady walked as elegantly as a heavily pregnant lady can walk. She strolled as though this were something she did all day long, as though this was what her legs were designed to do. Well, as you might have guessed, she didn't kill me and eat me. In fact, Animal, the other animal, made so much noise coming back out of the woods that the she-wolf ran off. He found me there in some kind of shock, and I couldn't really explain to him what had happened. Somehow I don't remember. He got me back to the kid with the cell phone, and together we got my parents to come pick me up. At first, they banned me from seeing these kids ever again. Then Dad found out that 2 of them were the kids of 2 of his bosses at work, and the ban was immediately over. I never told any of them about the dog lady. Not my parents, not my friends. But her image fascinated me and led me to study animals and nature. I learned that this animal is not supposed to exist and is not even in the fossil record, so it should never have existed. Yet, I not only saw a member of this species in the flesh, very much alive, but I saw a pregnant member of this species. That means there had to also have been at least 1 male, and we know that soon after that came babies. There's a good chance that 22 years later, this species may very well still exist. But I won't get to see one of them in the flesh again if I'm sitting behind a desk all day working a normal job. And so I'm a park ranger, spending as much time as I can in the forest where this creature lives and where mystery and wonder are still absolute monarchs. Werewolf in the Warehouse, as told to Peter Bernard, read by P.Q. Ribber. When I was a kid, my father co-managed warehouses in the meatpacking district of Manhattan. This was the late 60s and early 70s, but the area was already in decline, and my father told me never to visit the neighborhood after dark. Now it's an expensive place to live or work, with dance clubs and TV network headquarters filling the former warehouses. But this is a story my father told me about the area before the spotlight shone on it, back when it was a neighborhood hidden in shadows. Now, my father was a very serious man. I'm not telling you, I'm certain that what I'm about to tell you is true, other than the part at the very end, but I know that it was true to my father, because I saw the look in his eyes when he told it. I, myself, was not there, so this is just me recounting hearsay. But it's an interesting story about those times either way, so here goes. One night, my father came home in a worse mood than usual. Instead of arguing with him like always, Mom seemed genuinely concerned about what was going on with Dad. Needless to say, that made me and my brother concerned as well. We gathered around him to ask what was the problem and if there was a way we could help. Dad was a hard man, but this moved him and he got teary-eyed, and he told us we wouldn't believe him anyway. That made Mom wince, but made me and my brother want to hear the story 20 times more. He resisted for a while, so we got him a beer from the fridge, and soon enough he relaxed enough to agree to let us in on his troubles at work. It seemed there was a werewolf living in his new warehouse. You can laugh. My mother certainly did. I think my reaction was to shout, "Boss!" while my brother just gasped in awe. "What does that mean? He's living in your warehouse, Dad?" I asked. "Well," he began, "you know, we just bought that abandoned warehouse next door to us, and I hired a crew to clean it out and get it up to code for us to use. There are these rooms upstairs in the warehouse that must have served a use in years past, but my partner and I have no use for them. Today, one of the men smelled something bad coming from there, and when he investigated, he got attacked by what he called a wolf man. He said it was Lon Chaney. It was a hairy man with fangs. Tore him up pretty badly. I had to send him to the doctor, and I'm not looking forward to paying those bills either." "So what happened after you called the police?" my mother asked, and he glowered at her. "I can handle my own business. I don't need any Gestapo to protect me," he shouted. "So in other words, some hippie is living in your factory, making a bad smell, and you're hoping he'll just go away on his own, is that it?" Mom sneered as she got up and got ready to serve dinner, muttering, "Werewolf, schmerewolf." After Mom left the room, my father continued telling the story to me and my brother, but more softly now. "The crew I hired refuses to go back in there before I clear out what they call the werewolf," he informed us. "So now I'm trying to find a crew to go in and flush out whatever or whoever it is, and to clean up all the smelly dead animal parts in there." "Well, if there's meat in there," I joked, "that can't be a hippie because they're all Vita-vegetarians." Believe it or not, nobody laughed at my joke. "I'm not siding with Mom," my brother began, "but if you called the cops, they might clean up the mess for you on the taxpayer's dime." "Yeah," my father retorted, "but once you invite the vampires into your home, you can't blame them for what happens next." Apparently, my father did not trust local law enforcement for some reason. "If they see code violations," I offered, "couldn't you just say this is why you have men cleaning it up? I mean, they can't fine you for violating code in a warehouse that you aren't ready to open." My father patted my head. "Such a boy," he said with a sad smile. "Such an innocent boy." The next night was Friday, and my dad never came home till very late on Friday. Saturday morning this week found my brother and me watching cartoons as usual, but with the ear out for whenever Dad got up. We wanted to hear the rest of the werewolf story. Dad wasn't up till around 1, And then he immediately plopped himself, beer in hand, in front of our old black and white cathode ray TV set to watch baseball. I almost said Yankee baseball, but I think in those days Dad actually briefly preferred the Mets. A commercial came on for Fisher beer. Did you know that Fisher is the one beer to have when you're having more than one? Every kid from my generation in New York knew that. You were basically saying, if you want to really tie one on, drink or fish. We're cheap and have a high alcohol content. What an awesome advertising campaign. Anyway, when the commercial came on, my brother and I badgered Dad to tell us about the werewolf and what had happened. Dad had not really woken up, and he had not eaten any breakfast, and now he was drinking a beer. So we had to ask him a few times before I think he had any idea that there was someone talking to him, let alone that there might be meaning in the sounds these short people were uttering. But once we had established contact with Planet Dad, the entire answer we got from him was, "Oh yeah, got it taken care of." Of course, we pressed him for more information, but this angered the half-sleeping zombie version of Dad, who just wanted beer and black and white baseball. Our mother heard Dad growling and shouted at us to go outside and play and leave our father alone. We hated to hear that on Saturday because the best TV shows used to be on that day, but we went out and talked to all the neighbor kids about our father's werewolf until dusk. In those days we lived in what is now called the West Village, but back then was just Greenwich Village. A bunch of us kids had been walking west, talking over and over about the werewolf and what it might have been, but as the sun set we walked back east because we knew it was dinner time in all our homes. Suddenly, we heard a howl echo, and at first we laughed and looked around for who was making werewolf noises. One of the other kids noticed him first and pointed him out to the rest of us. There was a man wearing what I at first thought was a Batman mask, crouching on top of a walkway connecting two old factory buildings. I can't recall if the buildings still stand, but if they do, they would be in the area where the High Line Park is now. It connected, I think, the third floor of one building with the fourth floor of another if you walked inside it. This pointy-eared man was on top of the covered walkway outside of it. I couldn't even figure out how he got there. Did he climb up? Did he jump down from one of the rooftops? Then, the most amazing thing I ever saw happened. The guy jumped off the third-story walkway. He seemed to be jumping down to chase us, so we all screamed and ran. I have no idea if this guy broke both legs when he landed, or if he actually chased us, and none of my friends knew either. We were all too scared to look behind us until we got to our respective homes. Once inside, my brother and I compared notes. I didn't remember if he was wearing any clothes, but my brother got the impression he was dressed all in black. I remembered him having pointy ears on the top of his head, while my brother thought he must have been wearing one of those hippie jackets with the fringes on the sleeves, because when he jumped, it looked like he had long hair on his arms that blew back in the breeze. We both agreed that he appeared dark in the distance, and that he was definitely the source of the howling. That night at dinner, we pressed Dad for information. Was this werewolf dark-colored? Did it have pointed ears on top of its head? Did it howl? We got non-committal answers to all of these, but he gave me a sharp glance when I asked about the tall ears that gave me the impression he was saying yes to that one. We never told our parents what we saw because they would have put more severe limits on our personal freedoms in response. And Dad never told us exactly what he did to get rid of the werewolf of the warehouse. If they had scared it out of the warehouse, it's not that unbelievable to think it might have taken up temporary residence on top of that walkway, only a neighborhood over from the meatpacking district. As far as my brother and I are concerned, to this very day, we both wonder if what we saw and heard that day on the west side of Manhattan was a genuine, full-blooded werewolf.
Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button. Or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.